welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we are breaking generational curses in the Black community. Today's guest is Dr. Shawn. Hi, Dr. Shawn.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I've already been talking to you before we started, and I'm glad we hit record so our audience can hear how wonderful you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I love in your introduction, breaking generational curses. We are changing the game. So thank you for the podcast and bringing information to our community.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me on that. I know today we're going to talk specifically about the mother-daughter relationship. So we're going to get to that in a minute. But for now, I just want them to know the amazing work you do and a little bit about you. If that's okay, I'd like to share that now.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Dr. Shawn is Dr. Help me pronounce your
my first name. Okay. So my government given name is Shawn. Fuqua. Yes, Shawn, named after my father, Richard Graves.
Okay, got it. Is affectionately known as Dr. Shawn for short. And she is an LPC with almost 20 years of working in mental health. She specializes in unearthing generational trauma in women, which we will be talking about today. Dr. Shawn is an author, an educator, and therapist with a private practice. Mm-hmm. Very, very good. Awesome. Well, that was a nice short summary. Why don't you tell us a little bit more basically about how you got into the business of being a therapist to begin with?
Oh, absolutely. So other things that I would include in my bio, being a mother. So we have a blended family of 7. I've given birth to 2 children. I'm also helping raise my husband's son, and he has 5 children. I am a advocate and an educator, so I also teach at a couple of universities, teaching new students in psychology and in counseling courses. And the question that I often get asked is, how did I get here? How did you get to 19 years of doing therapy and being in the profession? Actually, my background.
All that going on, yeah. What's all of that?
My bachelor's is in business management. And I say that because, starting out in school, I had no desire to be a therapist. And I laugh because it really wasn't something that I thought about. I wasn't unfamiliar to therapy, but as you know, especially when you think about 20 years ago, it's not like the top of our list.
Yeah.
And with my job at the time, I was an auditor. So I would go out and people would share these stories with me about things that happened to them. A woman had found her husband in bed with another woman. Somebody had lost my father and things like that. So I would go in and people would share these stories. And so what I decided is that I wanted to learn how to listen. I didn't know what to say. My thing at the time was never judge, just listen, and just, especially as people are pouring out these sensitive topics, just listen. But I wanted to listen and then be able to say something. So that's actually why I went back. I didn't necessarily believe that I would sit down and have a private practice and, be doing what I am doing today. So that's kind of the long version of how I got started in therapy. And so often I tell my students that the field will find you. You don't necessarily find the field.
I love that. And I just want to bring a quick point out that you mentioned, because you said you started as an auditor. I don't know if you want to clarify what that is, but I know that it's like tense, at least for the person being audited, because I've been audited. And I guess like you said, it will find you, because I like that you would listen. You know what I'm saying? Because when people are violating policies and procedures and things like that, yeah, sometimes it's intentional, they're trying to get away, but a lot of times they're just human people. You know what I'm saying? With a human life, with human experiences. I mean, I know someone just got in trouble when their husband was going through cancer. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, well, of course she didn't have the stuff sides, because she's fighting for her husband's life. So I just think that's amazing about you, that you even as an auditor who probably had a checklist.
I did.
I did. You cared enough to at least listen to the things people were saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so yeah,
I'm just
that's
curious, can you share what type of auditor you were? I'm curious.
so I was an auditor for Head Start, and Head Start is a federally funded national program for early childhood education. And
Okay.
so yeah, when you get funds, when the agencies or the schools or whatever site got funds, they would send somebody out to make sure that you are following federal regulations. And so that's what I would do. And so I had like this whole large area, and that's what I did throughout the years. I would go in with my checklist and making sure that they're meeting the standards.
Good. Awesome. So you've always had some level then of passion for service.
Absolutely.
If you're working in Head Start, you still care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that happens. How long were you an auditor?
I did that almost 5 years. I think 5 years.
Okay. So you did that 5 years, and at some point you're like, okay, I need to transition into therapy. Did you have to go back to school, I'm assuming?
Oh, wait a minute, doctor. Oh, it didn't happen like that. Didn't happen like that. But I
said me in. Okay. I'm just assuming. Okay.
So during that time, yes, I did decide to go back to school. So just a little bit about being the auditor for the county at the time. It was the county who oversaw the program. To move up, most of the people had master's degrees already. And so I knew that if I wanted to move up, and I was a young mom, I was a single mom, a Head Start mom as well. And so I knew that I would have to go back to school. And I actually started going back to school for business management. I wanted to own my own business. And yeah, so that I started out there, and I took a few business classes. Didn't like them, but I knew if I wanted to move up in the county that I would need an additional degree. Fast forward, the job cut funding to the program, so the federal government was cutting the grant. If you work in any type of nonprofit or any type of agency around there, when you receive funds from somebody else, that is a possibility, and they cut the grant, and so my position was cut. The good thing was, though, I had gone back to school, and so I just decided to go for HR. Okay. When I went to the program, they were getting rid of the HR program, and they told me that I could use some of these skills in terms of communication and active listening if I took this counseling courses, took these counseling courses, and I could still do some things and get like this HR certificate. So that's how I signed up. So it was never thought about therapy. It was never thought of, it really, as I said, found me. And it was a wonderful experience going through that program.
Nice. Awesome. It's amazing how when one door closes, another one opens.
Absolutely.
It's like a nice little transition for you. So that's good, because I'm glad that you shared that, because I think a lot of us just, we get news like that. Oh man, you lost the contract. Sometimes that's the only thing we can focus on.
Absolutely.
We miss the forest for the trees. So thank you for sharing that. So okay, so then now we're to the point where you go into counseling. So how did you get to, tell me how you went, because when we're starting, we're just open to pretty much, did you always know you wanted to work with mother daughters, or did you kind of transition into that?
So when I started out, I was working with women. A lot of times it is very easy to associate or connect with people who look like you or have some similar situations to you. And so when I came out of the counseling program, I thought I would work with women and do these family education things about being a single parent, or dating as a single parent, all this other stuff. I still, not therapy, but doing these educational programs. I loved speaking and doing workshops, because I did a little bit of that in Head Start, working with the parents in Head Start, and I always enjoyed working with parents. But again, as I said, I was a Head Start parent myself, so it just seemed to be a natural connection. And in my therapeutic journey as a licensed professional, I did not start out working with women. It's just interesting because even when I think about the journey to get here, it was working with domestic violence. And I also had to work with the offender as the one that was offended. I worked with children who were in the foster care system, or if they were coming back home for the first year, they would send some professionals in to kind of monitor, not necessarily first year, but going back home for 6 months. So I did that. So while I thought I would work with women, it took me someplace else. And it was in that space that I found my way to education and teaching. Having taught a few classes or doing workshops, I was able to find my way to a local university back in Michigan. Yeah, I have to say I'm from Michigan, even though I live in Georgia now, because I'm always from Detroit. I'm a Detroit East Side girl. So.
Yes, awesome. You said, I'm sorry, you live in Atlanta?
I live in Atlanta now, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So you've been around Black folks like forever.
Forever, yeah.
Okay, cool. So by default, then you're going to work with the Black community. You don't really have to do a lot of marketing for that because that's who you're surrounding. Just by the way, in case we have somebody that wants to work with you, where are you licensed?
I am licensed in Michigan, and I am licensed in Georgia.
Perfect. And do you provide telehealth?
I do 100% telehealth. I also do behavioral health coaching. So I do have people who are outside of both of those states that we do some skill building with.
Nice. Awesome. Very good. That's what we need. We need so much of that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we started, you wanted to work with women, but you did that for like the domestic violence and stuff like that. But now you got your own practice, and so you can be very, very clear and concrete.
Correct.
So, and you found your niche to be women, mothers, and daughters.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, when I hear of these relationships, I have to say I've had all types of stuff happening in my life. But one thing I cannot relate to, I mean, I've been angry at my mother, but I have the best mom. And I cannot imagine a life like it just I genuinely enjoy my mom, and I'm not trying to be insensitive at all, because this is probably going to be more beneficial for people who don't have that experience, but I just want to share, I can't imagine what my life would be like. She's so meaningful. She's such a great asset to my life that when I hear about these estranged mother-daughter relationships, I can't imagine. But you, on the other hand, you hear about them. I hear about them too, but you specialize in them. So please, what do you see the most in mother-daughter relationships that are complicated?
That's a good question. So I just kind of want to clarify a little bit. When I talk about mother-daughter relationships, that extends from anything of learning how to communicate better with mom, or letting mom know you are an adult woman without being disrespectful, to the mother wound. And the mother wound is a term that we use when we talk about attachment that may have been missed or misdirected. You're familiar with the attachment styles. You have the insecure attachment.
I am.
Disorganized. Fill the people in.
Most of our
we have disorganized attachment. Sometimes this is known as insecure attachment. There's avoidant attachment, and this is where you begin that you shut down, you don't share. And then there's anxious attachment, where you really are worried about somebody breaking up with you. And then there is the secure attachment, which is always the goal. And so what we know about attachment styles that actually develop when you are under 3 years old is if how the baby bonds with those caregivers, especially the mother, because there is a genetic piece there. When how the child bonds with that caregiver in those early years determines how you will relate to a mate or in intimate relationships, not just intimate relationships, friendships as well, because it creates that first experience before you have words, your emotional connection or disconnection or lack of. So if something's missing, those emotions are communicating to the brain, that when you have a need, someone is not meeting your need, or when you have a need, you don't know what to expect. And so that's why they said it's very important what happens in the first 3 years of life. So to bring it to what the work that I do, the mother wound talks about what happens when that attachment, there is some type of misconnection, disconnection, when the attachment just isn't there. And so what you asked was, what do I see the most? Well, I do have a few women that fall into that category. Many of them are somewhere kind of in the more so the middle, where it's just like they're good relationships or decent relationships, I would say. I try to even stay away from the words of good and bad, but they're relationships. They have relationships with their mother, but it's like maybe I still feel like a child when I am talking with her, or maybe she is overprotective. Sometimes we call it overbearing. So it's more so of that, and the person is frustrated but still wanting to honor and connect with their mother. So we find people are somewhere in the middle of that mother wound and just really trying to strengthen that mother-daughter relationship.
There's two things I wanted to bring to just add to what you were saying. The first one is when we're talking about the attachment styles. I was reading about this person who was going to volunteer at an orphanage in an African country, and he was anxious about it because he says, "Oh my God, there's going to be all this crying, all these babies, all this will drive me crazy." And the person who's the director says, "No, it's not going to be very loud." And he said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, because when children, as you were saying, are used to crying and nobody coming, they stop crying."
That's true.
And lo and behold, he went there and he was like, it was quiet. It was like a pin. You could hear a pin drop. And that just breaks my heart because I must say something about my household because it's loud up in here, okay? Like all the time. But it just broke my heart because, yeah. And just to the second part, I'm glad that you clarified, that it's not typically on the extremes, that it's somewhere in the middle, because when I hear that, I think of just a lot of personal relationships that I know with people where you see them like laughing and connecting and caring a lot about their mothers. But at the same time, it's almost like you said, like a childlike relationship. The way my daughter with me, and she's 8, these people are 38, 48.
Correct.
Can't request certain things or still do what mommy says and stuff like that. So how does that work then? Because, that can't be healthy,
It's not.
You gotta respect mom, but come on, like how do you work with that?
It's not. And so a lot of times when you find yourself in the space, if you feel like some of the things that mom is saying makes you feel like a child, one of the things we first begin to talk about is boundaries. Do you have any boundaries? And so when you are a child, you mentioned your daughter is 8, and I said we have 7. They're all adults, almost except one, thank you. But we've had enough experience that when they were younger, we as the parents created the boundaries for the children. Mm-hmm. And as they got older, your goal is to expand those boundaries. And so when they're teenagers, you want to expand that a little bit more. But that doesn't happen if you haven't allowed appropriate space when they are younger, so they feel okay about expanding and exploring and stepping outside. Because what happens as an adolescent is there is a natural developmental piece where you begin to separate yourself from the parent. So there's some natural things that should be happening. And then when you become adult, you assimilate to a different type of relationship, or you become a different type of parent. Because we don't have these conversations, because you don't fully understand, probably doing the same thing that was done to you, or what you feel like you should be doing, there isn't that separation. And so you have mom, and it could be a dad too, but I deal with mother daughter. But you have that parent who is still treating you like you're 8. So you really don't have an opinion. You should be doing this. That's a bad decision. And so that's why you said when you have people who are 38, 48, in adults who, when they're around their parent, feel like they can't say anything. And then if you also add in some of the nuances of the African American family, and what I mean by that is, like, respect is something that we hold in high regard. The mother is held in high regard. Yes. So it becomes very careful. But to answer your question, the first thing we begin to work on is boundaries. How does that adult woman set boundaries, not just with mother, but with anybody? Because usually, if it hasn't been set with her, it hasn't been set with others.
Exactly. God, this is bringing up so many questions. One, and I could be assuming, but that you're working mostly with the daughters. I'm wondering how this looks like. Are you actually working with the mothers too? And I also want to know, well, can you answer that first? Are you working with mothers?
So yes, most of the time, the women that I'm working with is the daughter. I have had people who have come in as mother and daughter, or and this was in the beginning of this, who the mother wanted to come and the daughter wanted to come. And so I moved away from that the mother can come or the daughter can come. I do not see both of the women anymore, because sometimes I just want her, whoever she may be, to feel free to speak however she needs to speak. And sometimes you may not have the words to articulate it in a beautiful manner. So I just said, just talk, just put it out. And so because of that, I don't want them to think that I'm going to go back and say something to the other one, or it may lead to prejudicial thinking or how I feel about the other one. If I don't know your mama, I haven't seen your mama, if I don't know your daughter. So the woman that comes, sometimes she is the daughter and sometimes she is the mother. Like, it might be a mother's like, I don't know why my daughter doesn't talk to me. So yeah, it could be either one, but not anymore. It was rough.
I can't imagine all that estrogen. The next thing, I can't help but when I think about our community, a lot of times people who can afford, to go to a private practice, they might not have as extreme barriers, but they still do. Like, there's still racism, there's still oppression. There's, sometimes there is financial. I don't know if you offer like a sliding scale or something like that, but even if they don't have it now, they likely had it growing up, and at some point in their life, financial limitations, just safety, all the things that affect food, nutrition, all the things that affect our community, and our domestic sexual violence, like we're talking about, that does not discriminate. And I hate to say this, but I'm thinking of a particular family myself, and it's almost like that was going on. It was domestic violence, and they 3 daughters never challenged their mom because they knew she was going through so much. So it was almost like, I'm going to let mom treat me like a child because mom can't handle any, got to have to change. And again, this is the old school, mindset. But how do you handle things when you have those additional barriers? And, it's not like if you could just sit down and say, hey, mom, I'm a grown woman now, you wouldn't be in therapy to begin with. So how do you break through while also being sensitive to all the different variables that make up the Black family?
Well, one of the things I would say to that situation that you described, you have daughters who now have their main concern and their focus on the mother. That right there is something that would have to be deconstructed and reconstructed, because the child cannot take care of the parent. But sometimes you do see in certain situations children who look out for their parents because they see their parents struggling. The other thing
you gotta elaborate on that, because I didn't do that. So you went over Dr. O's head here. So you can't look out for our parents?
No, yeah. So I often tell people you can't pour up into a cup. When you think about energetic exchange or influence, the parent genetically has a connection to the child. And when you are talking about a child trying to look out for a parent, while you can get a emotional feeling from what a child maybe do or say, or your child may be excelling in school, that will not heal your wounds. The healing of the wound has to happen from the inside. Now, a parent can do that for a child because there's a genetic connection. When it is I'll call it a mishap or a misdirection, is actually called transgenerational epigenetics inheritance. We call it TEI. I'm gonna say it again because it is a big word.
You can email me so I can put it in the notes.
I can.
Okay.
Transgenerational epigenetics inheritance. And so what TEI is the genetic exchange that happens between a mother and a child, where a mother can pass on trauma. And so what we understand about epigenetics is that while your DNA structure or cellular structure does not change, because you may have experienced trauma or have been, you mentioned, we talked about sexual assault, domestic violence, racism. Just when you think about how we have been socialized in this country, it's traumatic. And so we're on guard. We carry that in our cellular structure. That is passed on to our children. So when you talk about a child who cries all the time or doesn't cry, a lot of that comes from that experience. The way that it's healed, if you're dealing with a child, is a parent can bring that healing to a child. A child can't bring that to a parent. You still with me? Okay. So what I encourage people to do is, when you realize there has been some unhealthy behaviors, things that are triggering, as an adult, you can do the healing. And that's when we do shadow work or core work. A lot of times I call it healing the inner child, things like that. But you have to do inner work in order for that healing to happen. And so that's what I mean when I say you can't, the child can't heal the parent.
You're saying the 8-year-old child, not the 38-year-old child. Or you saying the 38-year-old child can't heal mom either?
No, you can't. You just because you didn't come from you came from her. She didn't come from you. She could do it, but the challenge is when you are an adult, it doesn't make a difference if mom heals. At that point, you have your framework is already in place, and so it'll only come from you doing your own healing. It can happen in childhood. So if mom goes to therapy, you got an 8-year-old daughter, if mom goes to therapy, and let's say the first 8 years she didn't know what she didn't know, but now she has the opportunity to actually change hers and her child's.
Love that. So then the 38-year-old's responsibility then is to do the shadow work for herself.
Correct.
And if mom wants to get on board, great. But if not, myself.
Correct.
Okay.
And you can still be okay, because what happens as in your adult brain, or you're able to understand that mom, before she was a mom, was a little girl. She was a woman. She was in a relationship. You can understand that. But prior to that, that's my mom. So I don't necessarily even see her having an origin story.
Right.
And a lot of times that's the things that we break down in the therapeutic relationship, and we begin to talk about her mom, your grandmother. And a lot of times it's a good relationship with the grandmother. If it's a strained or estranged relationship with the mother. But when we started to talk about that, I was like, well, how did mom get along with her mom? It's like, it's a generational thing. And so, again, there are things that you mentioned, like finances, environment, racism. There's a lot of other factors that can fall into why you feel like you're not getting what you need from your mother. You can understand that as an adult. When you are a teenager, you don't understand that.
Yeah. You're so true. I mean, certain things I didn't realize until I became married and had a child myself. And I was like, oh, my mom, she wasn't doing too bad, Right. I'm doing my best, and I'm sure messing up. So,
right.
Let's touch on this, because I know relationships are, that's really what we're about too, whether it's intimate partner relationships, whether it's relationships with our children, relationships with work, and etc. Can you tell us more about what you're observing when we're not handling this first relationship with our mother? How is that showing up in our other relationships with people?
Oh, wow. Okay. so it will show up. I have to say and explain again, for the Black community, a lot of times we have heard about what happens when the father is absent. But if you have a present mother who has experienced trauma herself, who has been emotionally dysregulated or does not know how to deal with her emotions, there is going to be some things that you will experience from that as well. It's going to show up in your relationships. It can show up in your problem solving skills. You more than likely will have issues regulating your own emotions because you don't have a marker or a beginning. Definitely in your intimate partner. Yes, you can see it if a father is absent, but there's also that attachment we talked about earlier. When that attachment is missing, how you connect and see people, you're going to be yearning or looking for that connection because it was missing from early experiences. And while I talk about this, I always tell people this is not to blame mothers because we don't know what we don't know. But one of the things that I tell people is like, it's not a one thing. It's not an only thing. We have several things that we are dealing with at one time. When you think about the ecological system, which is a theory from Yuri Brofenbrenner. He talks about the microsystem, that's your home, the mesosystem, that is your community and your surrounding environment, and the macro system. And the macro system would be the society. So when you think about how Black people have been socialized in society, racial discrimination, microaggression, we're still dealing with things, seeing things on TV. When you think about the mesosystem with church, we've talked about that offline, or if we have an extended family that thinks a certain way, the schools that you have been you attended, that has an influence, and then your home. And so you have a lot of things going on. So this is by no means to make a mother say, get defensive, but if it's something that makes you feel uncomfortable, is there a way that you can improve? A lot of times I say, if you feel something, like, let's do some soul searching on that and see where we can dig in and see what we need to pull out, what we need to examine, what we need to heal, and what we need to let go. So I just wanted to say that because sometimes when I start talking, I'm a mother. And when I read the book, it is called, I have it next to me, I have to get you the name for it. But when I read the book as a mother, like my mother stuff, did I do something to my girls? I was a single mother. But what I know is that as a single mom, they missed some things. I gave them my best, but now as someone who's more educated and years later, I'm like, yeah, of course they missed some things because I was doing this by myself, and this job is not meant for us to do it by ourselves. So I before I dug in too deep, I just had to do my PSA that this is not about the mother, but I want the mother to understand that if there is something in the mother-daughter relationship, your daughter won't be able to give it to you. What you want to do is encourage her to go get help because you did the best you could. And then you do some self-examination, be willing to seek out support.
I'm glad you said that because if there's anything I can say about my relationship with my own mom, and then I'll talk about my relationship with my daughter, is that it's not the absence of conflict or adversity or difficulty. It is the acknowledgement that, yes, I messed up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. Like, I told, don't do what I did. I understand that understanding a person's pain, validation.
Correct.
That's what I want to say with my daughter. I mean, thank God, because of that, I've been able to know that, okay, well, my mom said I didn't have to make some of the mistakes she made, so I don't have to, but I'm making other ones. Like, and by the time, I've already come out with this, I was incarcerated for 4 months. You know what I'm saying? That means for 4 months, I did not see my children. And thank God you mentioned 3. Thank God he had just turned 3, so I feel like, okay, we beat, that part, but there's no way I can say that didn't affect my children.
Correct.
The investigation, even, which was for most of my child's life, of course it did. I did my best. Correct. I mean, the story, this is actually a beautiful sort of what I was trying to do, but it had a consequence, a domino effect that caused me to be taken out of my children's life. So I want to ask your permission, and if there's any feedback here, can we as mothers accept okay, that we're going to mess up. And that when it's brought to our attention, because so many mothers, I did the best I could, or a lot will deny that there were any problems. And I'm like, that's
Yes.
because everybody got problems, you know. But sometimes it's such the wall is so high that the daughter isn't even able to say, ouch, that hurt.
Yes.
Andrea's mothers just go ahead and accept, look, I'm gonna mess up and I'm gonna mess up again. I hope I don't go to prison again. I'm gonna mess up again.
We hope not. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, what? You know?
Absolutely. So let's back up a little bit. One of the things that I share when you are working with me in therapy is that it is a 5-step process. Okay. And so when we talk about acceptance,
Can we go over those steps?
I can. Before we get to acceptance, we have to get to awareness. And so sometimes we've had things in our life that we aren't really aware of. Again, going back to Black women in general, often I talk about we have been sent to this country to produce. When we got here, Black women Black in chains, right? Black women have never, as a people, been given the luxury to rest or to be taken care of.
Right.
We took care of other people. So even then, up into the 60s, Black women were domestics, housekeepers, children, taking care of other people's children. And even then, when you think about your grandmother, she either worked or she was taking care of somebody's children. If she wasn't taking care of aunties, uncles, or another, her own siblings. And so as a people, Black women have always worked, and we have always taken care of others. And I've mentioned that because I'm talking about awareness now. And that's one of the reasons why I do have the conversation is I was like, you got to look at who you are and what you're bringing to the table. And I'm telling my good sisters, it's okay to stop. Let's catch our breath. So the first step is awareness. And you got to have an awareness if there's going to be any healing. Then we have acknowledgement. You have to say it out loud, speak it, or write it. You don't necessarily have to tell everybody your business, but even in your spirit, if you can just say it and just know that this happened to me. You shared and you talk about your experience of being incarcerated, and I talked when we talked offline. I said I appreciate that because I'm not gonna let that hold me. I'm not gonna have that as a secret or something that will bind me in shame. So we have that awareness, and then we have that acknowledgement that has to happen. The next step is acceptance. And so when you talked about the story of can we just accept? Yes, we can, but the other 2 steps have to be in place to know that we are not perfect, that we will make mistakes, that we don't know everything. And sometimes that can be a hard dichotomy to let go because of the standard of mother and her role and how society sees us. But that's why I tell Black women we can't use their yardstick to measure. That doesn't mean I don't want to be an awesome and the world's best mother to my children, but I can't use their way and the things that they do because my story, my backstory, my origin story is different. And so for that mother, I want her to know like it's okay to say that I made a mistake. And I had to do the same with my daughters. They were adults at the time. I'll just go back and apologize. Yes, I got defensive. I'm not going to tell you that Dr. Shawn didn't get defensive. My daughter said some things to me, then started talking about you a therapist and I was
the worst when the therapist is
yes, they will pull it all out on you.
Yeah, they use that on me too.
Mm-hmm. And when I mentioned, when she said it, I did have to sit with my feelings, and it was my best friend who's a therapist too, and just said like, it's okay for her to feel that way. And I was pissed.
Now you mad at both of them.
Pissed.
Yeah.
But I was like, she's right. A feeling isn't right or wrong. A feeling is just communicating information. And if my daughter felt like I didn't give her what she needed at that time, she has a right to feel that way, even if it hurts for me. And I had to sit in that. And then I came back and said, I'm sorry, that was never my intent. And then she was like, that's all I needed was an apology.
That's all she needed.
That's all she needed.
I love it. Black moms, it's okay. You're not weak. You're not
No.
a bad person. You're not
No.
admitting that everything they're saying is,
Correct.
yeah, it doesn't have to be.
It does. No.
They need to just hear you.
Yeah.
I'm about to get tears. Like, that is everything. That is everything. Just hear what I'm saying. Just care. Just care. I love that. And I want to say congrats to you for being able to find the words to say that. Because
not easy.
I know. Yeah.
It was not easy. And I'm saying that to let people know it's not easy. It wasn't even being a therapist. It was somebody just bringing it to my attention to say, like, feelings aren't right or wrong. They're just communicating information, and you can't tell somebody else how to feel. I'm like, dang. You sure? Those my seeds. You sure I can't tell them how to feel? And you can't. When you have
that makes sense though, because I know you did your best. You know what I mean? You said before, if it's okay if I share you mentioned this on the show that you were a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. I mean, I'm doing it with a husband and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't imagine having all of that responsibility on just you. And it's like, but like you said, a teenager or a kid, like, they don't understand that. Like, and they won't have any real connection to it until they become parents themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's not easy to do, and I'm just so glad that you were able to have that healing moment with your daughter. So I want to hear the rest of the steps, but it sounds like, I'm sorry, at least the concept of it is somewhere tied into what needs to happen.
Well, we talk about apology. So let's even talk about using the line, I'm sorry. I say apology is where you try to make amends for your behavior and the conscious effort to not do that again. So you come back with I apologize. So we'll go over the steps again. The first one is awareness, then acknowledging it. Yep. Say it out loud or write it somewhere, but just at being able to admit it. Then we have acceptance, and acceptance is almost like bringing it in. So it becomes a part of your story, it becomes a part of your narrative. This is one of the things that's really important, because when you're dealing with trauma, violent trauma, sexual trauma, when I talk about acceptance, sometimes that concept is hard for people to understand. I said acceptance doesn't mean it's right. It's just, this is my story. This is what happened to me. You can't deny it, because your body still holds the experience. Your body holds trauma. A really good book that talks. Body keeps the score. That's what I was gonna say. That's a really good book that talks about how the body still holds the experience. You may even release it in here, but you also have to know that your body is holding it. So even if you don't tell yourself the story, the body knows. So that's why the acceptance becomes important, because the acceptance is actually, when you bring it in, it gives it a chance to release. You get an opportunity to put it wherever you want to put it, not in the dark, but this is my story. The next step after that is the action, and the action is where the work begins. And I say the work because now I have to be mindful of my behavior. Now I might have to use self-affirmations. Now I have to really change my actions and my behaviors. And so that's where the action, you putting forward, I'm doing something different. And the fifth step is ascension. And ascension is just how you get to that higher self, or to a better version of yourself, or shed old habits.
Love it. Clarification, why can't you just say I'm sorry?
So I use because you're not sorry. Meaning you're just apologizing. So you're not, you're just apologizing. Apologizing is, again, like I said, you making amends, but we move away from I'm sorry, because you're not sorry. It's not that you didn't mean that it didn't happen, but as a person, you're not. You're human. You didn't know what you didn't know. That kind of thing.
Person, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I go. I tell them we're moving away, and even when you think about it, because it's funny, because the girls text me before I got on here, I don't know how you got with my daddy. and it's because, that was like 30 something years ago. But one of the things I chuckled, I was like, well, I was 19 at the time. My 19-year-old self doesn't know all that I know now, or my 19-year-old self thought he was cute. I don't have a list of all these things. Does he make a good father? He was cute. He was kicking game. That's how I got with your daddy. So when I say I'm not, I didn't know what I didn't know then. I'm just out here being me. Or if I use physical punishment to discipline my children, if I cuss you out, or if I scream, or if I petty, I didn't know what I didn't know then. So now when we talk about I apologize, that is to make amends and to do something different.
I love it. You said the 5th stage was ascension.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot of times in these phases, people don't make it to the last stage. Like even if they're there, they don't stay there. They kind of come back. So what are some, and you're talking about, you really are, like, most people don't want to be great. Most people just want to do their best, but they don't want to, like you're talking about higher level. A lot of us don't strive for that. We just, we just want to exist. What are some things we can do to kind of be at that ascension level where we're just killing the game with our relationships with our mom and daughter?
So we go back to that action stage. You have to do the work. And so in the action stage, especially if you're working with a therapist or any type of a coach, they're going to tell you you're going to fall short and you're going to make mistakes. And so I think that's also one of the biggest pieces to help you get to that level, to know that you are fallible. You will fall short. When you find yourself kind of like dipping down, what can I learn when I down? How did I get here? And so once you learn how you got here, you're able to move forward or to move up and do things to keep you from falling back down. That happens with any of those areas in your life. And so I'm gonna share. I've been married 3 times, and I do talk about that openly. And so I was married to my children's father, and I got married again when I was 30, and then I got married again when I was 38. No, actually I was in my 40s when I got married. I met him when I was 38. And I'm saying that not that you won't have relationships where you break up or you have a divorce or you lose a job or something like that. But when you're at that level, what did I learn from that last experience? Be willing to learn instead of kind of fighting it or seeing this is a reflection of me or as a bad person. Could some of that be you? Absolutely. But sometimes it's just life. And so, what do I learn when I'm here? And that helps you. So if I slide back down, I know when I get that second chance, or just like with my 3rd marriage, communication was key, being honest, being open about our needs up front, taking our time before we actually got married. And so there was just some things in there that I learned from those other experiences. So not that it's perfect, but it's very much different. So I am at a different level, another level, a higher level. Did that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense because, I think the flip side is, some people stay in these marriages that are not working because, especially in the Black community, because we don't get divorced. You know what I'm saying? Like our moms didn't, our grandmas didn't, our great-grandmas didn't. So you stay in something that's not working, and they don't get the benefit like you to learn because they keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Stay in there.
Yeah. So that was very, very helpful. And I do see and then where the higher self comes from, because you're taking these previous experiences to be better, show up better today.
Yeah, and learn from them. Self-awareness. Yeah. Going to that EQ, also known as emotional intelligence, that self-awareness, self-reflection, motivation. What's your intent? Really what's your intent? And it really also comes back to you and what is in you. When I say what is in you, why do I want to be in love? Do I feel like love is missing? It's like those kind of questions. And when you're working with a professional, you can answer those questions. And I'm throwing that out there because oftentimes we don't have time to do that type of self-reflection. Remember I said we're working, we're taking care of business, we have children, we have jobs, we have businesses and all of these things. So when you think about questions like that, we don't get a chance to do that. And again, that's where therapy comes in, or having your professional to help you get to your best self. Because you talked about a lot of people are good with, I say existing. being average or just existing, just
Absolutely.
getting through the daily life. And how do I get to my better self or my higher self? Well, number one, you also have to realize that there is another version of you waiting to come forward to really, like we don't struggle. We weren't birthed to struggle, but for us as a people, that has been very much a part of our narrative. And so I try to encourage people that.
Yeah, we want to survive. We don't want to thrive.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I gotta say it. What do you call the Black church plays into that?
Oh,
I know I put you on the spot. I know.
Yeah. So it does major role. So I have to do my disclaimer. I am originally a church girl. When I say that, my grandfather was a minister. My aunts, my mother, and 3 of her 4 sisters are still active in the church, in the church community. And so when it comes to my belief, very much have a foundation of Christian principles.
Okay.
However, I have to do my however. I don't know how I would classify myself now, but because I've been in church and raised in church and also have gone through church hurt, I had to and went back to church again. So I do say that, but knowing some of the things that I see and how we're groomed, and I'm using that word intentionally, and what we're told, especially women, it keeps us in a box. And there's nothing wrong with leading your life with Christian principles and the strong belief that the Bible provides. But there's also other parts of the Bible that we leave out when we talk about spiritual death and spiritual quickening and listening to the Spirit. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
We are. We're spiritual first.
Yeah. And so you don't hear a lot about what does that mean and how do we nurture and guide our spirit. And so, definitely the Black church plays a big role because there is misinformation, miscommunication, and limited information, which is why it's very important that a person who is in church and who has some maturity do their own. It's hard for new people because you really don't know what you don't know and you're trying to figure it out. But if you have some maturity, it's important that you do your own research and figure some things out, especially women, because a lot of times our stories are limited, and we're not told how powerful we are as spiritual beings, as mothers, or as keepers of the womb. Because I say that a woman can give life not only physically, but her words to her family, to her husband, to her, whoever she's around, children, whatever, just because of who she is and how she has been created. But that's another conversation.
It is, but I still love that. I love that. And I also love that you mentioned, first of all, you admitted church hurt, because I think that's something that we're still struggling to admit to. And that you were back, because the thing is in life, and this is just what I've learned with my own growth and transition, is that, the church is also made of imperfect people.
Yes.
Sinners. We're all sinners. So a lot of times when we look at the people in the church as the representation, yes, it's supposed to represent God, and, but sometimes it doesn't. And we have to do our own work. And it seems like everything you're talking about goes back to doing your own work.
Yes.
And that's where being able to get past these transitions, whether it's with the church or with your mom or with your daughter, that's really where it comes in. It's within. It's not out.
Yes.
It's not out here. It's in here. I asked you about the church, put you on the spot. Now I'm going to put you on the spot with, and this one's probably going to be easier. Systemic racism, colonization, the Jim Crow, how has all of that affected our ability to live in the ascension stage? And I ask that because my husband is, he's actually African. So I'm directly exposed to some of our roots just by my connection to him. And one of the things that I see, whether I'm there or whether I'm just interacting with him and his style, is that we are naturally some of the most creative, spiritually most inclined, spiritually in tune people. I mean, we're like that. Most African cultures are just spiritually connected. And then we come here, with this Eurocentric mindset, and a lot of that gets diluted. I mean, in slavery, God, if you spoke your African language and if you, practice any of those traditions, I mean, you could be killed, you know what I'm saying? Or sold off from your family. So you lost connection with that. And what I'm hearing you say is, the more connected you are with that higher self, the better off you'll be. But we've lost that in our history. Is there anything you want to say about, can you speak to that? So do you see that in your practice? And if so, what can we do to kind of get some of that back?
So, 100% absolutely, how we have been socialized. And I know I've said that several times, like even now, today, there is a debate and infighting about Black people, and how we practice and show up in our spirituality. Because if you aren't doing it this way, you definitely have to be going to hell, or it's considered demonic. And so that of what we have been taught when it comes to colonization is still plaguing us as a people. We do have to, as I mentioned, and I love how you said it is going within, of having quiet spaces. So I'll take the example of meditation. If you mention meditation in some church spaces, that is considered demonic, or kind of Eastern practice. That's not Christianity, those kind of things. But what I tell people is meditation is you listening for God. You are a believer, you have to be quiet. Praying is asking and talking. So how do you get how do you hear what you're asking for if it's time for you to move or go, if your mouth is moving? So, meditation is one of those things that I think is important. It doesn't have to be long. It's not necessarily what you see, on videos or on TV, but just being quiet and being still. There is an inner voice. For some people, it could be considered the Holy Spirit, the God voice. Call it the higher self. There's an inner voice that will try to communicate with you, especially if you are asking the questions. So that's one of the things that I think can be very important. I also say getting in nature. Now, again, you sound like a tree hugger, lady. Well, the sun is an energetic entity to shine on you, to make you feel good. You turn brown in the sun. The sun warms your skin. The sun actually, when it comes to research, spending 20 minutes in the sun can help with depression. Spending 20 minutes in grass, green grass, can help. Putting yourself up against a tree, because it has energy as a live entity, as a plant, if you will, but it has energy. So those things are some of the things that I tell people that they can do. It doesn't have to, it doesn't necessarily clash with Christianity. It's just knowing that, God is using these different things around us to try to communicate with you, to say, yes, you are a spiritual being. Yes, I'm trying to, nurture and feed your spiritual presence, not only through church or through the Bible, through socialization, but through some things around you. I want to talk to you. I want you to commune with nature, being in water, natural bodies of water. And so those are some things that I would say when you're trying to, get to the spiritual energy, just as some beginning things, along with doing your own research.
Love that. And that's something I think we don't do enough of. I don't know about you in Atlanta, but we have these beautiful trails around the house that is, I guess by we, I mean me. I'm just like, it's so, and it's true, because when I'm out there just hearing the birds chirp and catching the little squirrels, whatever, running, yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you very much for that. What is a myth that you'd like to debunk in the Black community about mother-daughter relationships?
A myth. So that's a goal. I guess what I would say is that there are probably more challenges than we like to admit. I don't know if it's necessarily a myth, but um, you don't speak negatively about mom, and that's why I also had to say what I say. This is not for you to publicly. I tell people, you don't put things on Facebook, even if you are in, even if you are in therapy. This is not for you to go back to your mother and talk about what you learned, or now I want to tell you.
Yeah, please don't say the therapist said, because I was tired of people putting me in the middle. Like, first of all, half the time it's not what I said, but yeah, because I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you want mom to be open to it, then don't corner her and make her feel like under attack.
Yeah. No, I mean, but that's it. So I think the myth is, especially coming off of Mother's Day, we celebrate Mother's Day in the month of May. And it is interesting. It's always so conflicting with me. I too have a great relationship. You shared about your mother online and offline. With my mother, a wonderful relationship. I'm grateful, so grateful for the mother I had, because what she did is always create space for me, because I'm more like my father, and my sister is more like my mother in terms of, like, she's more of a quiet, demure woman. I mentioned growing up in church, so she's very reserved, and I'm a little bit more to the other side. But it was never like she tried to shut me down or quiet that part of me. And so I'm grateful to have a mom who always created space for Shawn to be Shawn. I say that to say, when the holiday comes up, I know a lot of people have good relationships, but then I know some people, they don't have good relationships. They got to act like they have good relationships. And then some people are just hurting. Some people very conflicted. I'm talking about women, daughters. And so, like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily a myth, but I know it's so much more that goes on, and the woman often feels like she can't talk about it. The mother might have to pretend like she has a great relationship with her daughter because her friends do, or she see other mother daughters. So we can't let people know, we got to act like we're, good like everybody else. But you really don't talk to me but Mother's Day and my birthday, or you send text messages instead of calling and coming to see me and spending time.
Yeah, I see relationships where I know they're not good, but they seem to be those are the mothers that get the most roses or the most, whatever on these days. And I'm like, well, what about the other ones?
Correct.
You briefly touched on this, and I want to make sure we don't transition before we can give it the attention it needs. Why would you say mothers, when we're experiencing this dynamic, why are we treating our daughters differently than our sons? Or what is that looking like? You had two girls? You had two girls, right?
I had two girls.
Okay.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I'm raising my husband's son, and it's definitely a different relationship. He is a sweetheart too, just such a gentle soul.
We are different.
So for all my moms who have sons, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's different. It is really, really different. Yeah. So I've had some experience with that just from my studies, and what it seems to be is that the expectation is different. Not that you don't want your daughter or your son to go to school and do well, but I think when we talk about developmentally, remember I said adolescence, there's some things that happen in adolescence, there's some things that happen in childhood developmentally. I think when you have a mother and son and a father and daughter, what we get from that parent is different. So a lot of times the son, again, if he gets what he needs in that early age, when you see the adolescent age, what he's given to the mother is different than what the daughter is giving. And so, a lot of times you just have a mother who, you don't give me a lot of problems, or if he likes to see her smile or make her happy or do things, whatever. How that exchange between the male child and the mother it's just it's a different exchange. And so when we talk about that, because as I mentioned earlier, teaching, we talk about that in that life span development class, and what happens under the Freudian belief. Even though it's still a theory that is challenged, there is something that goes on between the male child and the mother, as well as the female child and the father, in terms of how it develops who we become. And so I think that's why you see some of the difference between the mother son and the mother daughter, where you don't get a lot of that tenuous and that friction that you have when you have two females, because what's happening during adolescence, she's becoming a woman. We add in, menstrual cycle. So there's a physiologically hormones, chemicals that are coming, where I'm just trying to be me. And you have two women, or as I say, two queens can't exist in one kingdom. We know she's not a queen at 14, but
she don't know. That's the problem.
But she doesn't know, right? So yeah, just a little insight, but like I said, I kind of from my studies moved away from that. It was too deep, and I didn't have my son at the time, but now that I have him and he's been with us 4 years, I was like, oh, I see why mothers be gushing over their sons. Oh my goodness, yeah, I could have done this, 2 or 3 of them. So
yes, Lord. And it's hard because at the same time we have the same dynamic in our house. My daughter does get envious, but for me, I don't know if you see this, but it is the mouth. It is the mouth. Like, if I ask my son to do something, he does it. And if I ask her to do something, I have to explain her rights and why she feel like, I mean,
the huffing, the rolling of the eyes, the sucking of the teeth, yeah, all of that.
And it's funny, and to her benefit, my son, sometimes he don't do it, but at least it ain't all of this. You know what I mean? He's just like, Anyway, thank you so much. So, we really went over some really great stuff here. And I know that we've got some mother and daughters that are going to be healed. There's a portion of the show now, it's called What's Good. And it's basically where I just like to give a hypothetical situation and pique your brain to see what you might advise. Can I do that for you now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so meet Janelle. Janelle is the youngest of 3 daughters, and she is a 40-year-old African-American woman. She is now married with 2 children, but she has a relationship with her mother that's just, as you mentioned earlier, it's not bad, but it's not great. She can't do things like discipline her daughter or her children in front of her mother. Her mother talks critically about her husband in a way that's not appropriate. And she's just having a very hard time standing up to mom and saying, Mom, stop. How would you advise her to move forward in that situation?
So there's a couple of things that are going on here. Like, so you mentioned where she is in terms of age. So I'm gonna start there and talk about, what happened over the last 20 years and how many spaces was she able to use her voice. So that's one of the things that we might actually start and talk about the conversation, unless she's ready to kind of dive in deep to talk about mom. But you also mentioned, like, it's not necessarily a bad relationship. So sometimes when you come in, I'm not going to dig into your mother. This is not mother bashing. This is not blame. Never, ever blame. But that will be the first thing.
Clients want you to do that sometimes?
I'm sorry, say that.
Do clients sometimes want you to blame their mom?
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier than, if I could put it on her, then it's not on me.
Okay.
So that would be the first thing. Over the last 20 years as an adult, how many spaces were you able to use your voice? Sometimes we have some space. Sometimes they looking like, wow, I never really haven't.
Yeah.
I also had mentioned earlier, so then we'll talk about boundaries. So I would want to know boundaries that she has with her husband, boundaries that she has with her children. Are there any boundaries? And really monitor and listen to see if she projects on her daughter. We're talking about mother-daughter relationships, right? So and how does she treat the son? Do the kids see her treating things differently? So we'll start with those things first in terms of conversation. Then we would go into what is it that she needs. I hear respect is one of those things, which is why we also want to make sure that she's not projecting on the children, because it's easy to require and demand respect from our children, but it could go to some critical ways with our children as well, which is something you see mom already doing with her about her husband. So my first piece in working with this situation was to get her to see how her behaviors show up from this relationship, because that's what we're going to dissect first. Then when we talk about mom, I would bring in some empathy and understanding. Now remember, is she already doing some of these things to her children? And we would talk about where this came from, and then try to get her to understand where she thinks mom is coming from. Okay. And then the next piece of that is like how to bring that conversation about mom, what I need from you, or how this hurts me. And I don't know if I would necessarily tell her that she has to have a conversation. That would be more of like, if I'm talking with the person, I might have her do a letter to her mom that she does not give her mom, and then we come back and we dissect it in therapy. It might be her just opening up more spaces and realizing, like, I'm not a little girl. And when mom becomes critical or starts talking about my husband, hey, I gotta go, or we have been here long enough, thanks mom, we enjoyed the day, or I was just stopping by. But how she can end it, and she doesn't have to sit there and take it, because this again is not about teaching her how to attack mom or go in. But you mentioned that it's not a bad relationship. It's kind of in the middle. So she feels like her mom is one who is open to hear. We would talk about how to have that conversation with mom.
Love it. Love that. Awesome. Well, these are really great, just great tips, great feedback. I can tell you're an awesome therapist. And you know what I can really tell is you've done a lot of good work. Yeah. You just am sensing, you're just picking up on so much stuff that goes on in the therapeutic relationship. And I don't know, I just think it's awesome. I think it's awesome because now coming to the therapeutic relationship as a healed person, or a person who's healing, because we're never complete.
Correct. Yeah.
That's helpful. I want to make sure I don't forget to mention your book. I know you're an author, so tell us a little bit.
Yes. So I do have a book. I actually have a children's book. My children's book is called Growing Places with Bailey Day.
Okay.
So Growing Places with Bailey Day, oh, what a feeling. And so I started a children's book series. This is the first. The second one hasn't come out. But what I wanted to do is help us start the conversation at an early age. When we talked earlier, I was saying a lot of times we haven't talked about emotions, emotional regulation, like it's okay to feel. And so Growing Places with Bailey is about a little precocious 7.5-year-old who asks a lot of questions, and how her mother tries to answer those questions. And it also has tips in the back of how parents or people who work with children can help children process those questions, and things to do when children have big feelings. So that's the book, Growing Places with Bailey, and this one is Oh, What a Feeling.
Love it. Awesome sauce. Well, so we're going to make sure that we get a copy of that link too, so that our wonderful audience can get it if they want to. And if also you give us a link to your practice, that'll be in the show notes in case somebody wants to work with you. Or
okay,
are you individual, or do you have a group practice?
I do. I'm a solo practitioner. And so I am at capacity now, and I laugh because truly, Dr. O, when I opened up the practice 2 years ago, during COVID or coming out of COVID, when I said I did mother-daughter relationships, I was full within a month.
I bet.
And it really has kind of kept steady. Then, I have people who drop off, but like there's a waiting list. And like yeah. So it's not always, again, the big stuff. The other book that I want to mention that is not mine, that is good if you're just trying to explore and do better, is Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel. She actually goes into the adult daughter can understand and heal from lost nurturance, protection, and guidance. And so this is that she deals directly with the mother wound. And it was reading her book that made me say we have to have conversations as Black women about this, because again, our origin story and our narrative is different from theirs, which is why I want to have the conversations. If you can get in, call me, we'll put you on the list, get on podcast, share information. But we want to heal. We want to heal.
Amen. Amen. On that note, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom that will assist our audience with healing. It's been a pleasure to interview you today. I've learned a lot. So I know our audience will. Are there any final words you'd like to put on listeners?
No, I just appreciate you. Keep on doing what you're doing. And if you need anything, you know how to reach me. And thank you for having me. And thank you, audience, for listening. Appreciate anytime somebody is trying to learn how to be better when it comes to mental health.
Very good, very good. All right. Well, thank you for coming, Dr. Shawn. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Since you've listened all the way through, come on in and join the family. If you haven't done so yet, please join our free community where we offer weekly trainings and monthly giveaways. We can be found on Facebook under the Black Marriage and Families Matter Facebook group. And since you're serious about joining our family, we also invite you to join our All In campaign, which signifies your commitment to go all in, not only for yourself, but in helping us reach more people by downloading this podcast wherever you are listening to it, leaving us a review, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This really helps us reach more people and change more lives. After all, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we can all get more done together than we can apart. With that said, I want to encourage you to share this episode with just 3 other people who you think might also benefit from our community and what we are offering, with the hopes that all of you can join our All In campaign. When you're done, simply click the link All In campaign in the bio and receive a free copy of my course entitled Goodbye Toxicity, which is valued at $297. This course will help you to work through some of the difficult experiences that arise in most of our relationships, and it's completely free to you with your commitment to join our All In campaign. We look forward to connecting with you every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening.